Welcome back to Unfiltered Unspoken Podcast. And we told you we're gonna keep bringing these life experiences. It's more and more. It's keep coming. We have another wonderful guest, Wanda Lopez, and she's gonna bring it to you. And it's all about mental health and the challenges that she went through. Welcome, Wanda. Welcome to Unfiltered Unspoken Podcast.
Thank you for having me tonight. I'm excited.
It's a pleasure. It's a pleasure. Can you tell the audience a little bit about yourself? And then, as you know, Sid is going to kick off the first question.
Perfect. So thank you everyone who's tuning in tonight. My name is Wanda Lopez. I am the founder and creator of Her Story in a Smile movement. I created this movement 3 years ago, originally with the intention to allow myself to self-express and be truth to myself with what I had going on at the time. I consider myself a trauma survivor and also a mental health advocate for women. My movement is mainly based on reminding women of the power that is in our voices. When we reclaim our voices, we're able to reclaim back everything that we may have lost along the way due to trauma or mental health. I do this in storytelling form. I am able to gather women from all different walks of life to have the courage to share their story and what is behind the smile, because as we all know, as woman to woman, we know that we all carry a beautiful smile, but more often than not, that smile comes with a lot of hidden darkness that is meant to come to light.
That's a beautiful way to put it. And thank you so much for being here with us tonight. So we, with everyone, always like to start at the beginning. As we know, it contributes to the story and how, you arrive at where you are now. So tell us a little bit about your childhood, your upbringing. What was your home structure like? And if you experienced any trauma as an adolescent.
So my childhood, it's not a pretty one. I was raised in a domestic violent home from a very young age that I can remember. Domestic violence was very prominent in the household. And so I grew up living around that on a daily basis. My father was the perpetrator in this scenario. He physically abused my mom many times throughout their 20 years of marriage. And I was also part of my dad's infidelities, if we could call it that. He would take me along to his other women, and that's how I became even more ingrained in the cycle of domestic violence, because not only was I experiencing my father's second life, but I was also experiencing my mother taking care of my sibling at the time who was sick. And all of that kind of altered what my childhood could have been, which was just being a kid. Instead of me being a kid, I was forced to grow up faster than others, again, due to the fact that I was surrounded by adults and events that no child should be part of. Aside from that, at the age of 8, I was sexually molested by a family member of mine. and that greatly impacted me. However, that experience, that trauma, didn't affect me until later in adulthood, when with my own children. To not go too far ahead, until now, the connection between me being molested and my kids was that around 5 years ago, my children were put in a scenario very similar to when I was molested at the age of 8, where they could have gone through the same thing had the police not gotten involved, or someone would have had someone not called out for help. My children would have been in the same predicament as me. This led me to want to face my own traumas and understand how it affected me, so I could better, I guess, teach my children the importance of speaking out when you are in a situation of abuse of any form. And also, I do struggle with anxiety and depression because of the childhood trauma. I was also a young teen mom. I got pregnant at the age of 17 and also got married at the age of 17. And so with all that along the way, all that trauma that back then I didn't know was trauma, ended up reaching me at the age of 28, when it was the second time. Actually, the first time I was 24 years old when I considered suicide, and again at the age of 28, where I had considered suicide once more because of the incident my children were put in. I thank God every day that my kids were not touched. However, it was still an incident that did happen, and which is why my passion and my focus is to learn more and dig deeper into my own healing, into the importance of trauma, because although a traumatic event may not affect you right away, it can show up later in life. And the last thing we want is to be enjoying life down the road and have a trauma that we didn't know of resurface, that can put a hole in our lives. And that's what I felt happened to me, where all my traumas kind of compiled together, which led to me wanting to have strong suicide ideation, which led me to create this movement, because it wasn't my desire to die. I don't think that anyone who goes through suicide ideation or completely fulfills it wants to die. I think it's more so of wanting that pain and suffering to end. And so because I had reached the point where my suicide ideation was really strong, it wasn't until a friend of mine actually sat me down and asked me, like, what is it? Like, what is truly bothering you? Or what are you having complications with? And it wasn't until I had a solo talk with myself that I asked, all right, Wanda, do you want to end your life, or do you just want the suffering to end? And deep down, I just wanted the suffering to end. Of course, I didn't want to die. My kids were already there. I have my kids to live for. But aside from that, I always knew and know I have a purpose, right? Whatever that purpose may be, is still to be found out. But I know that I'm in the right path because of the movement that I created, because what was originally intended to be an outlet of self-expression turned out to be a movement where other women can now say the same thing that I say, which is reclaim your voice and speak your truth.
Love it. And you got a lot to dig into. I don't even know where to start, but I guess I'm going to start at the beginning. What was the effect being raised in a domestic violence home and you watching your dad abuse your mom?
Well, can you repeat that again? The beginning? I'm sorry.
I'm sorry. I said, what was the effects? What was the effects of being raised in a domestic violence home and your dad abusing your mom?
For me, it was just, for me, the impacts with that was, well, for me, it's like growing up, my dad was everything, right? And then once I saw his dark side, that's when I realized that I guess at a very young age, I adapted the thinking that all men are the same, that all men are bad, that all men cause pain. And on my mom's, I kind of learned what I ended up following without knowing at my adulthood life from childhood life was my mom's codependency towards my dad in the relationship. I feel like codependency is something that is hard to talk about, even for me nowadays. It's still something hard to admit, but something that I know I must acknowledge, because in codependency, I feel like we, from just watching my mom, she endured more than she should have had she not been so codependent with my father. And what I mean with codependent is that a lot of factors that came into play is that my mom at the time was an immigrant. She didn't have any papers. She had a sick child that she needed to take care of, and she didn't have a job to fend for herself. So for me, I saw that a woman's role in a relationship like that is basically no role at all. Is doing everything that the husband wants you to do. And so I kind of took that as, I kind of learned that a woman is meant to endure and keep enduring and not have a limit. And that's where the fine line comes in, because of the codependency, because of the fear, my mom endured many years of violence that could have ended had she had the not courage, because when you're in an abusive cycle, it's not about the lack of courage, it's just the fear. But had she had more support, had she had more knowledge that she was in a cycle, I feel like she would have at least understood what abuse was. And because she didn't have that knowledge, all of that ended up showing up throughout the years with the abuse, and not just physical abuse, psychological abuse, mental abuse, financial abuse, verbal abuse, psychological abuse. There's so many forms of domestic violence and abuse that don't get talked about, and my mom fit all that criteria.
Yes. And what I wanted to ask, so when your dad used to, kind of take you out along with doing his dirt, did you see the kind of domestically violent nature in him with these other women as well? Or was it just kind of in the home structure?
So the thing is that I was aware he had he would see other women, but there was one specific woman who is the mother of my half brother, and so it was mainly with her that I would be around, and I never saw any violent characteristics or actions that my dad would with my mom. And I guess that's what confused me a little bit. The way that my dad affected me was not just him taking me with the other woman. It was more so of the fact that he would leave me in the car while he did his stuff. So it's not like I was exposed to activities that he did face to face, but I was still there from the outside. And so that kind of messed me up a little bit, because I knew that even though I was a child, I knew that an adult was not supposed to do that.
Wow, your dad that's dead. He left you in the car.
Mm-hmm.
Wow.
Yeah, and my dad, he has a naturally he's temperamental, and he's like naturally just more aggressive. Just his personality is just naturally like umph. However, he never showed that side in front of others. It was only when he would be under the influence, like in family gatherings, when there was too much to drink, that maybe that dark side would come out. But on the day-to-day, on a regular basis, he wouldn't show those colors to other people. It would only be at home. And then with me, as a little kid, I've always been outspoken. And part of my thing growing up that even my mom and my dad would have trouble with is me talking back, not necessarily being mean or disrespectful, but always having something to say. And so with that created a lot of tension between me and my father, because I would call him out on everything that he did. The moment I found out he was unfaithful, I was the first person to tell my mom that my dad was cheating on her. And then after that, any incidents that would happen between my parents, I would try to intervene. And even though my dad, like, at least in the Latino community, I feel like it's very custom to spank your child, except my father wouldn't just spank me. He would hit me with the belt, like, nonstop. He wouldn't allow me to cry. And if I cried, that would be more hitting. And that was just me being a kid. But when it came to defending my mom or saying things that he didn't like to hear, that's when he would become more verbally abusive. That's when he would become more physically abusive, not to the point that he would touch me. But for example, there was one incident that I had said something, and he got so mad that he grabbed the closest thing. It was a glass candle. And had I not ducked my head, I would have gotten hit. And it was so strong, the force of him throwing the candle, that he broke a window. So, like, maybe that gives an idea of how he can go 0 to 100 so quickly and not care who's in front of him, not even his own child.
Wow. Wow. Yeah, that's deep. So I was going to ask, what events did you go through as a child that you shouldn't have been a part of?
So there was, like, so when my parents would argue, I would always be in the middle. Either my dad would talk smack about my mom, or my mom would try to vent to me about what was going on. So I feel like a lot of it was adult problems. And it wasn't just my parents, it was my dad's side of the family, because that's who I grew up being closer to. And all of my uncles, since I was the first of everything, first child, first niece, and all of that, they would take me out all the time. And unfortunately, it wasn't places that a kid should be at, which would be like nightclubs, bars, late night parties. I was just always around adults. So I don't want to say that I never had a childhood, but I do feel like I didn't get the chance to be a kid or do kid things, because most of my time was spent around adults.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And what was the introduction of your half brother like? How did that situation pan out?
So when I met him, it was during a family gathering. My dad decided to bring my brother along and introduce him as his son. At the time, I believe he was maybe a year or two old. I think he was a year old. And to be honest, and my brother knows this, I didn't want to accept him. I actually didn't even approach him. I immediately said no. I think I was like 8 or 9 years old at the time. And I didn't accept him right away. It took me like an hour to warm up. And it wasn't until I saw my little brother under the table that, I don't know, I locked eyes with my brother, and I was like, even though I was a kid, I just knew that the right thing to do was to accept him, was to love him, because just like I didn't deserve to go through what I was going through, neither did he. Unfortunately, he's the collateral damage of my father's infidelity. And my brother received, even till this day, he's known as a kid born out of unfaithfulness. And it makes me sad for him, because it's not his fault. But and it makes me angry, because my brother till this day still carries that judgment and burden that should be going more towards my dad than him.
Wow.
Mm-hmm.
Wow. Um, I want to ask, since we're at the 8-year-old mark, there's a lot of things changing in your life. You meet your brother, and then you also mentioned that at 8 years old, you were molested. Are you
Yeah.
open to talking about that?
Yeah.
So, a relative molested you. Like, how were you coerced into being that person to molesting you?
So this was an uncle of mine, and it happened during his wife, so my aunt's birthday, and it was just my aunt, her husband, my uncle, and my mom and my father and me. Because at the time, my other brother who was sick, he was in the hospital, so it was just the five of us, and everything was going great until I got upset because my aunt had started crying because I'm sure she was feeling the drinks. And I had gone to the kitchen, and her husband followed me there. And I had, at that time, her kitchen was very small. So as soon as you entered and you made like a right, the fridge was right there. And so I had my face was facing the fridge. By the time I felt his hands on my arm, I turned around and he immediately started groping me everywhere in the body and eventually led to kissing me. And he didn't stop until I pushed him away. I don't know how I did it. I don't remember how I was able to push him off because um, it took a few minutes to get him off of me. But I was able to escape from there. And all I can remember is that the next day or a few days later, I had confessed to my mom of what had happened. But I had also begged her to not tell anything to my dad. And so that secret remained hidden until maybe 5 years ago when I decided to tell my aunt about the truth, about what had happened. And unfortunately, she just didn't believe me. She could say that she did, but she questioned me from the moment I mentioned my story, what had happened. And to this day, she is with him. Um, and the purpose of me telling her what had happened with her husband wasn't to cause more chaos or more hurt or a breakage in the family. It was just more so of, it was part of my healing process. I needed to get the truth out, and I wanted to start with the people that I know would affect them directly. And my aunt was one of them. She had no clue what was going on. But in me confessing that to her, it kind of broke our bond. My aunt was kind of like a second mom to me, and right now, until this day, we just don't have the relationship that we used to have. We used to talk all the time. I used to confide in her, but ever since then, it's kind of like she made a choice. Basically, she made a choice. Even though I never told her that our relationship would change, it's kind of like she punished herself, and instead of getting closer to me, she distanced herself more. So yeah.
And in that process, do you know if she confronted him about it, and which kind of gave her the doubt, or was it just between you and her?
So when I sat down with her, my mom was with me because I all I know is that when I told my mom when I was 8 years old, when it had happened, I know that she had told my aunt that she didn't want them coming for a while, but she never told them why. And now it's more so of her. I'm not sure. Like it's more so of I guess it's more of like an embarrassment for her to have to hear that. It's she did ask him if it happened, but for he neither confirmed or denied. All he said was that Wanda doesn't lie, so it must be true.
And she ain't say nothing? Like she say, do you think he did that to somebody else?
I don't know, but he has he's he's not a social person. First of all, if you were to look at him, you kind of get that creepy vibe because he's kind of antisocial. But the reason why it made it hard and more traumatizing for me is because I didn't have my dad, because I didn't have the love that I was needing from my dad. At the time, my aunt and her husband would often visit my mom to make sure that we were okay. And so um, my uncle would be the one to help me with homework, play with me, spend time with me. So I I had also gotten to the point that I considered him like a father figure because he was giving me everything that my father wasn't giving me at the time. And so that's kind of what messed me up more because it came from somebody that I thought I felt I was safe or protected by. And so that's what affected me the most because it affected me the most in the sense that it took me this long to tell the truth because of the fear that no one would believe me, especially my aunt.
For sure. You going, Demetria?
Oh, sorry.
You
Um,
good?
look, I was gonna ask, and since we're piggybacking off of that,
Yeah.
your kids was put in a situation. Can you tell us a little bit about the situation your kids were put into?
So in 2019, I had moved back. I was living at Florida at the time, and I was in the process of moving back to New Jersey, which is where I'm originally from. All my family's here. At the time, I was going through a separation in my own life with my husband. And so my plan was to move back here. But the first place I ended up at was at my mother-in-law's house. And that's another story that has to deal with my children because her husband um, has history of also being a molester to one of my sister-in-laws. He had he's the my mother-in-law's husband is the stepfather, not the father of my sister-in-laws, and so the stepfather had sexually molested the oldest daughter, which is my sister-in-law, and unfortunately for her story, her mom didn't believe her either, and it was also one of those things that I don't know if it's just in the Latino community, but we tend to hide everything, shove everything under the rug for the sake of family. And so even though I was made aware of that, again, because at that time when I was made aware of her story, I didn't put two and two together. I wasn't thinking about my own trauma, and I wasn't thinking about the stepfather either, because the stepfather is also someone who you meet and you think he's friendly, he's so kind, he's generous, he's attentive, like all the wonderful things you can think of. But at the same time, he was doing all these things to my sister-in-law. And so when it came to my kids and I had moved here, I remember I had come out of work and I just needed a break for the night. And I was used to dropping the kids off at my mother-in-law's house because she's the one who would take care of them. However, the incident that happened with my kids had to do with the stepfather. And so I got a call from, at the time my son was 8 years old. He had called me and told me that the police had arrived. And at that point, I didn't even know what was going on until I went to the house to pick them up and realized that my other sister-in-law, who has a kid, had filed a report against the stepfather because they had another family member who was at the time there had caught him watching porn in the basement with his pants down. And then also my kid's cousin was the stepfather was sleeping with him too, but at that time the cousin was maybe like 10, 11 years old. So for everyone else, it was kind of like the kid should be sleeping in his own room and in his own bed. There's no reason why an adult or even the stepfather, specifically the step grandfather, should be sleeping with him. And so my sister-in-law went to file a report, and that's how everything went down. That's how the police ended up showing up. And I thank God every day, because when I went to find my kids and their cousin, they were all together. They were in the room, in a room protected by the police. And thankfully, they had no signs of being touched, no nothing. They were calm. They were everything. But that's kind of where it hit me the most, because not only did it bring me back to my childhood that I had lived through that, but it brought up my sister-in-law's story once more. And so with my own trauma, with the resurfacing of her trauma and all the family being involved, that's kind of what crippled me to go into the suicide ideation of it all.
My gosh, I'm glad that they were okay, because that's insane.
Yeah, it's something I'm still practicing forgiveness of self more of, because it's not like I didn't know that my mother-in-law's husband didn't have history. I heard it from my sister-in-law. But again, it's one of those things that like I just wasn't thinking about. I didn't even know what trauma was. I didn't even know, like I wasn't correlating all these events into this is a bad guy. You should never trust him with the kids. But again, I was also fooled. I also had a good relationship with the stepfather. And so the fact that my kids were even in that situation is what kind of like broke me, because I immediately placed blame on myself, because it's like I shouldn't have taken a break. I should have just taken my kids with me. I should have just stayed and dealt with it all. And like this wouldn't have happened. Like I went into a whole spiral, because I knew that the moment I experienced my trauma, I knew that I never wanted to go through it again. And less I did it. If I had children, that was the last thing I was thinking my kids would go through. And the fact that they were put in that predicament, even though it wasn't my fault, I still take a great fault in it, because as a mom, you want to do everything to protect them. And so it's something I still battle with. I have healed a lot since then, but it took me a lot, because even though they may have not been physically touched, even though maybe nothing happened, I will never know, because I was not there. And I won't know unless my kids down the road experience something or do remember that they went through that, and God forbid it does affect them. So like that's something I battle with, because of not knowing if it truly caused an impact or not.
Absolutely. Yeah, it's a painful waiting game, but you know, again, I'm glad that it wasn't the full Monty.
No.
And they were safe.
Yeah.
Now, since we are on the subject of in-laws, tell us a little bit about you know, the trauma you suffered in your relationship, in your marriage, how that all started, and you know what were some of the, you know, the most significant hard points during that time.
So I got with the father of my kids we met in high school. We were together since high school. We met when I was 14, turning 15 years old, but we didn't make our relationship serious until I was 16, 17. At the age of 17 is when I got pregnant. He had also signed up for the military, so that also made things more complicated, which is what, even though we were young, at that time, we were also like, all right, if we get married down the road, great. So it's not like marriage was forced, but it was in a way, because I had gotten pregnant and he was going to the military, and for the safetyness of me and the baby, we were kind of convinced to get married. And so everything was fine until maybe 7 years later down the road, where we had moved down to Florida. And at the time, because we were transitioning from another state to Florida, I had moved first with the kids. And it wasn't until a month later that my husband at the time had to decided to tell me the truth. He wrote me an email, and one night I was looking through my emails. I saw I got an email from him, and it was just a long email basically confessing all the infidelities that he had done through our entire relationship. And that was the first time I actually had considered suicide. I had never considered it before prior, not even with all the trauma I had with my childhood. That's the first time I had considered it, because it's one of those promises I had made to myself when I was younger that A, I wouldn't get cheated on, and B, I wouldn't get beat up like my mom did. And my mom got both and more. And so even though the last thing I needed was to get hit, even though there was never any physical abuse, the infidelity triggered me so hard because, again, little me had made a promise, and I felt like I couldn't keep that promise because I ended up with someone who was unfaithful with me the entire relationship. And so that affected me a lot. We tried to make it work. I did my best to make it work, but unfortunately, it was just the start of the unraveling of both of our darkness, both of our traumas. Instead of us getting better, it got worse. He suffered more through his mental illness. Like a year later, after confessing, he also tried to take his life away, and that caused another trauma in my life, because even though we were not in the best of terms, we were still trying to make it work out. And the fact that he actually did try. He wasn't successful, thank God, but he did try. It kind of left a deep mark in me because I loved this man. I loved him a lot. And even though we were going through a hard time, the last thing I wanted was for him to do that, because I was close on doing it. When I thought about the suicide after finding out the truth, I had broken all the picture frames that we had together. I ripped up all our pages. I was just so angry. And when I found out, it was during nighttime when my kids were sleeping. And so I couldn't make too much noise. And so I went into my closet in my room and I just started crying. And I saw a glass from the frame on the floor and I held it to my wrist. And I just said, no, it's not worth dying over this. You know, I didn't know how I stopped myself, but I just knew that it was not worth it. Like I knew that committing suicide was not the solution. And so the fact that my husband did try, it was kind of like, whoa, like it was just too much at once, because not only were we struggling with our relationship, but we were also struggling financially. Our kids were young, so we had a lot of responsibilities to take care of. And so all of that is what led me to actually move back to New Jersey, which led then to the incident with my kids, which then led to us trying to figure it out again. But then from the moment I got back to New Jersey, it was kind of like on and off. We would try to make it work, and then I would leave, and I try to make it work. And then the pandemic came, the pandemic came and I lost my job. I got injured because I got injured at work. We had filed for divorce. That was already done and over with. But because of the pandemic, I decided to move back in, and not necessarily for us to be together, because we had agreed we were not together. But it made it hard to heal, because even though we were co-parenting and we were not together, it's like that saying goes, you can't heal in the same environment that made you sick, you know. And it's not always the house that I'm talking about. I'm talking about people. Your environment also includes people, and it's kind of hard to move on or to heal or to even co-parent healthy when you're under the same roof where all the tension is still at. And so it's not actually until this year that I feel like I finally took the final step in finally leaving and not going back. And even though I'm not ready to speak about the recent events of this year, it's what my mom always told me from the moment I told her that my husband had told me everything. She told me, first of all, she told me that it was a hard truth to accept, because when you're going through stuff like that, I mean, I could be the only one, but you kind of want people to tell you what to do because you just don't know what to do. But my mom was like, I can't tell you what to do, but the one thing I will say is that when you're ready to leave, you will know.
That's deep. And your mother gave you some wonderful advice there. I must
Yeah.
agree. I was gonna ask, uh, um, your stepmother. I want to jump back. Your husband's mother. Did that
Mhm.
affect him? Did he like intervene? What was his reaction to the situation of his stepfather with putting the kids in a situation? And then I was going to ask, do you feel as though your stepmom knows that he's abusing kids and she's just being silent, like she's just pushing it under the rugs?
So he knew so when he found out that that was going on with the kids, so with the unraveling of that is what led for the whole family to find out what he had done to my husband's sister, basically. um and till this day there's no communication. Like they my husband and his sisters, they both spoke. The three of them spoke to the mom and told them it's either him or us. And unfortunately, my mother-in-law, it's not like she's at the moment. In the beginning, she was trying to defend her daughter because she knew that she had messed up when she needed her help the first time. However, I feel like it was maybe too much pressure from the entire family or fear of being alone. I can't speak for her, but from what I was able to see is that she can't be alone, and she just chose to stay with the stepfather, with her husband. It's not like she didn't know that her daughter was abused by him. She knew that. Her daughter confessed and told her and tried to show her and everything, and it was just swept under a rug, and that's why it was hidden for so many years, because not even the extended family knew, like the aunts and uncles. Like everything came to light the moment the kids were put in that predicament. The past, the present, everything came at one time. And till this day, there is no communication with the stepfather. Not from the father of my kids, not from my sister-in-laws, none of them. Like there is no communication at all. He is forbidding to see the kids, getting communication with the kids, anything. If my mother-in-law does take the kids with her, it has to be when he's not around, or it has to be somewhere local. She knows well that the moment we find out that he's present, that's it for her. And I feel like till this day she has done the right thing. But again, we won't know unless she decides to be slick about it and have him. In the beginning, she tried. She wouldn't bring him face to face, but let's say if it was my kid's birthday, she would bring cookies and then or a birthday card, and instead of letting me know, hey, here's a birthday card, or me assuming, oh, it's a birthday card from her, it was, but there was also a message from him. Or if she made cookies, it was him who made it. Or if she brought, because the stepfather is known for like construction and building stuff. So like if she brought like a wooden desk, she couldn't lie to me because I knew it was him who made it. And so that actually caused me to go no contact with her anymore. So this day, if I see her in person, I say hi. But I don't. She doesn't. She doesn't have my number. I actually blocked her after that. And the only communication she has is with her son, which is the father of my kids. If she wants to have a relationship with them, she's more than welcome to. But she now knows that there's boundaries, there are limits, and if those boundaries are crossed, then she knows she loses that connection with her grandkids.
I'm glad you have drawn your boundaries. You and some of your family have drawn boundaries with that, because they'll cross them every time. Now, I do kind of want to get into what was the like a significant moment that kind of led you into your project with Behind the Smile? How did that begin?
So that happened after the kids incident, and then after I had gone into a physical fight with one of my sister-in-laws because of that incident. I had never been in a fight at all, and that had to be one of my lowest points in my life because it went against who I am, my character. I will admit, I naturally do have this like kind of like feisty, fiery energy, but I have never gotten into a fight. And the fact that I got into a fight in a public setting was one of the most embarrassing things for me to have stepped down to. And all of that, plus the resurfacing of all the trauma I had not faced, all gathered together. And with the suicide ideation, it's not something you plan. It just comes out of nowhere. And when it comes so strong that you're ready to do anything. And the one thing I can recall is that I had gotten up. I was just so sad that day. And I was like, I don't know what I'm going to do, but I'm just going to get in my car and keep driving, and we'll see where I end up. And I was literally about to grab my keys and leave if it wasn't for actually the father of my kids. That's what I meant by friend earlier, that it was actually the father of my kids that had stopped me, even though we were not in the best speaking terms, because he had actually went through the whole hospitalization because of his own suicide attempt. He was able to speak from a place of experience. And so when he sat me down and actually listened to me, it's what allowed me to just take a step back and have a conversation with myself. And that's when I was like, I need to find something before I do something crazy to let everything I have in here out. And at the time, and even till this day, I still don't have the economical advantage to get therapy how I would like to. And so I started the movement, and I didn't start it as a movement right away. I just created an Instagram page, and the first post I did was me actually admitting that I was depressed. And that had to be the first time in my entire life ever being honest with myself, out of everyone, being honest with myself, and also having the courage to publicly speak about it. And I started by admitting that I was depressed. I started by sharing all these stories, and then it led to the name comes from me often getting complimented that I'm always smiling. And that's where the Her Story in a Smile came about, because I'm like, if people only knew that I have so much to share about my life behind this smile, they would understand how much this smile has cost me. I don't smile because I'm always happy. I smile because I survived, because I'm still here, because I'm able to speak right now. What I'm doing right now, even if it touches just one person, even if it was just meant for us three to talk about, the fact that we're letting it out, it's better than keeping it in, because when we keep it in, that's when everything starts piling and piling and piling, and that's when darkness creeps up even faster.
I would agree. I would absolutely agree. I wanted to ask really quick, even going through this movement that you're going through, are you still struggling with anxiety and depression now?
Yes. Yeah, I do. I battle it. It comes in waves. Right now, I feel like I'm just coming out of that depression wave. I just in March, I was a hot mess. I was just crying and crying nonstop every single day. Maybe I had 1 hour of peace, but I would just cry and cry and cry and cry. And it's because of everything that I'm going. Basically, I saw your post, Demetria. Actually, you posted a few hours ago saying how God, how you're thankful that God is basically redirecting you in your life at this time, and that's how I feel right now. I feel like maybe before I would have had the mindset that I'm starting over in a bad way, but now I switched that mindset to, yes, I'm starting over, but I'm starting with experience. I'm not starting it with a naive mind or an unexperienced life. I'm coming from a lot of experience. I'm not new to any of this. And just because I'm starting over doesn't mean that I failed in all the other things. If anything, it got me closer to me. And I also saw in your post that basically like that peace doesn't come easy. It comes at a cost. And that's something I do want to share, because my mom is also, she also shared another gem throughout my journey in saying that never envy someone's peace because you don't know the price they had to pay for it.
Wow, that's powerful. That's powerful. But I'm glad you're on here. I'm glad my post resonated with you, because that's always the goal, is that connection. That's what we always do. So I'm thankful. That just made me smile. Brought tears to my eyes, actually. So I'm like, yeah.
And let's see, I done lost my question. Oh, now where you are, with your project, with Behind the Smile, excuse me, where, what is the next step? Where do you see, where would you like to see the project? What still needs to be done? And what are the kind of key components to get this moving and help assist other women in this situation?
So with my movement, it's not complicated. It's just because it took me so long to share my story. I now understand how long it takes others to do the same. And so something that I would like to get at is to the point where I have more women share their story. The way I structure the storytelling and sharing, I don't put a date. Like if you want to share your story, for example, I will always tell you whenever you're ready. I'm always looking for stories. I do everything, like all the editing, all the curating, like all that. This movement is just solely run by me. This is just something that turned personal to a movement to have other women feel safe. It's more like a online safe space. But my intention is I love photography. So when I did this movement, I wanted to combine my love for psychology, because I'm also in school for psychology, with photography. And that's how the movement was created, because it started with me going through an album of my own photos and seeing how, it's true, a picture does say 1,000 words. And I want to be the one to tell you what those 1,000 words are. And it's not always going to come from me. It's going to come from other women. And what I may share, it may not resonate with everybody, but if I share another woman's story, it may resonate. And I just want to keep that going, because even though we all have different, similar but different stories on how things went about, we share one thing in common, and that is the fact that we're all looking for our voice again. We're looking for who we truly are, our power. We're reclaiming our power back, our life back, and that starts with us. That starts with us being honest with ourselves and learning that what we went through, the trauma we went through, to stop carrying the shame, because it sounds crazy, but the survivor, the victim, ends up carrying that shame with them more than the abuser does. We carry the embarrassment, we carry the guilt, we carry the suffering and the pain. And it's unfair that as a survivor or as a victim, we're forced to be silenced just to keep the peace, or just to keep the family together, or just to just because of the fear of what other people will say or the fear of not being believed. Because it's true, I feel like a lot of women don't speak up because of the fear that they won't be believed, or a family member may find their story and judge them. Even though my movement is based on visibility, which is why when I asked you to share your story, I also asked for a photo of you. And I specifically asked for a photo that can match your story if possible, because I want people to understand that at that time that you were going through what you were going through, you may have been smiling, but inside you were crying out for help. You were literally wanting someone to see through that smile and hug you and support you and tell you, hey, I don't know what's going on, but I'm here for you. I see through that smile, and I want my movement to resemble that. And so one goal of mine is to create a photo book of these women and share, like have one page be the photo, the other page be maybe like what's behind your smile, or what's an advice that you would give to the next woman who sees this. Like more like it's like a photo book, but kind of like I don't even know, like kind of interactive in a way where you can get closer to that survivor and see that, hey, I look like her, I smile just like her, and she's also a survivor, and this is the reason behind her smile, and that's also my reason. Or she told me, or this woman lived through this and she says to keep speaking your truth, so now I'm gonna speak my truth. More like a motivational photo book that you can see real women, real people, like as they are. Pictures may say 1,000 words, but not a lot of people actually pause and ask themselves that question, like, is she smiling because she's happy, or is she smiling to keep a front?
Absolutely.
Yeah, which leads us into closing out. We're almost at time. So if I can ask you, if you can give the audience advice on, I know you're still going through the healing journey, which makes this even more special that you can help connect, because our missions are the same, but my mission is for everyone, right? So hopefully that your life experience will connect with another woman's life experience. And this is even more beautiful because you're still going through your anxiety, you're still going through your depression, you're being very transparent about your situation. So can you give folks advice on how to start that uplift to the journey to healing? Just something, hey, you can do it, right?
Yeah. It starts with ourselves. Have that honest talk with yourself. Like what's truly causing your pain? What are the things that you can or cannot live without? Is what you're going through worth it? Most of the time it's not. And the moment you feel like you want to silence yourself is the moment that you need to speak up. I will say don't feel pressured. When I say share your story or speak your truth, it's not about you gotta say everything right away. It doesn't mean you have to share every single detail, but it's kind of like see it as in you speaking your truth, you are allowing yourself to liberate. You're breaking the chains of what has held you down for so long, and you're saying no, you're saying no, this is where it ends, no more. I'm standing up for myself. Don't allow anyone to rush your healing process, and don't let anyone tell you that your truth is not your truth, because only you can speak for it. And have God, get closer to God. If you don't have a relationship with God, I do have to admit that my movement is not the only thing that saved me. It was me developing a personal one-to-one relationship with God.
Wonderful advice to give. Now we do call this part of our show Shameless Plug. You see your banner scrolling across the bottom here, so you can let our viewers know how they can contact you, how they can utilize your services, anything you have for sale, anything you want to draw traffic to, just anything to shine a light on what you're doing and how our viewers can assist. You have the floor.
Well, thank you, both of you, for having me today. And for those of you who want to share your story or just reach out to me, you can find me on Instagram at HERSTORYINASMILE. You can send me a DM right there. I typically answer right away. Or if not, you can email me at herstoryinasmile@gmail.com. We can have an even more private conversation. And I'm also on YouTube, where I do share more videos on not just my stories, but on more educational when it comes to trauma and mental health. And as always, my platform is open for all women and anyone actually who wants to just learn more and advocate more for mental health and trauma.
Okay, we love it. And you just inspired me. I have done this before, posted a picture and said I've been through depression and stuff. And because of you, I'm going to honor another one. So I'm going to go find an older picture and I'm going to write another post. So
Yes.
you just motivated me to do that again. I think that it's time for it, right?
Yeah.
So thank you for that and the feedback. So we want to thank you for sharing your testimony. So anyone that has watched Wanda's testimony, that has watched a parent go through abuse, has watched a parent cheat on the other parent, has went through being abused, touched inappropriately, putting their children potentially in a situation, going through a marriage of cheating, depression, anxiety, you name it. It was just so much suicidal thoughts, so much that was mentioned today in this podcast. And I hope that Wanda's testimony and life experience resonates with you so that you can say this is you and you can start the journey to healing. We want to thank you for tuning into Unfiltered Unspoken Podcast. Hey, Sid, we're going to keep bringing it, right?
That's right.
That's right. Have a blessed day.